All right. We start a new sermon series today called Tell Me the Old Stories. Now, old stories meaning stories from the Old Testament. I'm not going to do a lot of the... do me a favor, turn that off, would you? Lee, turn the back one off. It's blinking. That's going to be distracting. But the old stories are stories from the Old Testament. They are not going to be the stories, the big, huge, like Noah's Ark and Moses. They're going to be smaller, maybe a little smaller stories, but stories you'll know anyway. Today we start with a story called Brother's Keeper. And before we get started, I want to ask you something. How many of you have ever played the game Clue? How many of you have ever played the game Clue? I grew up playing Clue. It's a board game. For those of you who've never played, it's a board game where there's a pretend murder, and you've got all these cards in your hand, and you're trying to decide which person committed the murder in the mansion, which room, and with what. And when you have figured it out, it's a whodunit mystery. When you figure it out, that means you win the game, obviously. So in this game of Clue, it's a whodunit mystery, murder mystery, and we're going to talk today about the first murder mystery ever recorded. And that was a guy who murdered his brother. Of course, I don't know if it was that much of a mystery because God saw it all and God knew exactly what had happened. But let's hear the story as it's recorded in Genesis chapter 4 about two guys named Cain and Abel. Adam lay with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of his soul as an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it." Now, Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel, and he killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." All right. The first murder in history. Cain and Abel. Let's look back over this. Adam and Eve, they produced at least two sons. One was Cain, one was Abel. Cain and Abel were different. Cain was the farmer of the family. Abel was the shepherd. He tended to the flocks. And they both decided to make an offering. This is the first offering made to God. The first recorded offering ever made to God. It doesn't say anything about God desiring it, God stipulating it. They make these offerings. And so when they make these offerings, these are the first ones. And up until today, when we put money in the plate, we're still making offerings to God. They may not be the blood sacrifices. They may not be the fat portions. They may not be from the field, but we still are making offerings of our lives to God. So they make these offerings. Well, Abel, for some reason, and the Bible's not clear on this, okay? So let's not read into the Bible anything that it doesn't say. It doesn't say why God likes Abel's offering and doesn't like Cain's. But he does. For some reason, he gives Abel favor. And Cain, he doesn't give favor. So what happens? Cain gets very upset. Cain gets angry. And it says his face is downcast. He's so angry you can see it just by looking at him. So God comes to Cain in his first conversation, and he says, why are you so mad? Why are you so mad? He says, why is your face downcast? And then he says, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you. And then he says you must master it. Sin is crouching at Cain's door. Sin is like an evil demon just waiting, lurching behind every corner, waiting to take over. Its desires to take control of Cain so that Cain will fall into the temptation of this sin. And folks, it's no different with us today. Sin is around every corner. Sin, it is that evil demon saying, come, do what I have for you. Come, go away from the will of your Father. Come, do what you want to do, even though God may not like it. Sin is a temptation that looks so good, but in the end is rotten to the core. Now, in our Bible study this past week, we were talking about James, or it might have been the week before. It was actually the week before. And in the book of James, let me share with you just a couple quick verses. It says, each one is tempted when, by his own evil desire, he is dragged away and enticed. Each one of us is tempted by our own evil desire. We did a sermon series a while back ago about sinful nature. We call it human nature. How many of us remember, or how many of us have ever said, well, it's just human nature to sin? Or how many of us said, just human nature to do this or to do that? Well, human nature is our sinful nature or our evil desires. And it's when we commit to these evil desires that we truly sin. And James goes on to say that sin, when it is lived out, it leads to death. Now, I'm not talking about death as when we, die physically, because that's already going to happen, right? Because of the world's first sin, original sin, we are all going to die. But when we allow sin to control our lives, when we allow sin to take over, when we give in to those evil or worldly desires, you might call it, they may not always be so evil like they were for Cain. When we allow that to control us, then Jesus is no longer in us or is not in us. And it leads to an eternal death. That's the power of sin, the evil demon that is crouching around every corner, the one that took control of Cain. The one that we have to fight to make sure does not control us. Because sin, when given ultimate control of us, will lead to ultimate death. But we have the freedom. Cain had the freedom. He had the freedom to choose to sin or not. God says you must master it. You must master this sin. He has the ability to allow the sin to control him or to control the sin. Now, it doesn't mean that we have the ability to be perfect, perfectly sinless. But we do have the freedom to choose which direction we're going to go in. We have the ability to choose whether or not to try to master our sin or just allow it to take control. Why do people allow sin to take control? Because it's easier, because it's more enticing, because of temptation. And so it's easier. So we have that ability. We have that freedom to do either or. Now, Cain, we see, did not master sin as Jesus told him he should do. He did not master sin. And he did what? He went to the field, took Abel, and what did he do? He committed what? The first murder. Now, obviously murder is a sin, but what are his other sins? Can you think of some other sins that Cain did? Jealousy, envy. Oh, just hang on to that because I was going to get to that one. Anybody else? Huh? Anger. What did that anger lead to? Not just murder, but what probably came before the murder? Anger leads oftentimes to hatred. And Pat back there said, he lied. He lied. Did you notice that God comes and says, where's your brother? What's he say? Oh no, I don't know. He's trying to avoid the consequences of his sin. You know, he may have learned that from his parents. Y'all remember in the Garden of Eden, God says, okay, he comes to them and he approaches them about their sin. And you remember what Adam does? He says, oh, that woman made me do it. He's trying to get out of the consequences. And the woman says, oh, the serpent made me do it. And she's trying to get out of the consequences. Well, the same thing here with Cain. Oh, I don't know. If he does, maybe he can get away with it. But we can't get away with sin. We can't get away with fooling God, can we? God sees everything. God knows everything. Even though a lot of times we try to live our lives acting like he won't know the things we do. But folks, we can't hide from God. And that's really a good thing, because when you learn that, and you know, well, he doesn't expect perfection all the time, and you can come to him. The ultimate Father on Father's Day, you can come to him. It's better to know that he knows everything, because then you don't have to try to hide, and things get easier. Things get easier when you can share these things openly and honestly with God. Okay. What does he say? He says, I don't know. Am I what? Am I my brother's keeper? Well, in essence, basically, God says yes, because he punishes him and for the rest of his life he'll be a wanderer. Okay, but that's the question I want to come at today. Am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? And I'm going to actually ask 3 questions. 2 others that are related very closely. Am I my brother's keeper? But also, who are my brothers? Now, brothers/sisters, okay? Let's keep that in mind right now. In the context of the Bible, it was Cain and Abel, 2 brothers. In the context of the writing, oftentimes brothers mean, male and female. We're talking about brothers and sisters here. So anytime I talk about brothers, I'm talking about both male and female. But I'm going to say, we're going to ask, am I my brother's keeper? If so, who are my brothers and sisters? And how does that play out? How am I my